Welcome to Deciphering Growth, the show that explores mental health from every angle. We bring you conversations with personal opinions, stories, and practical tips. We aim to break down the stigma and help you live your best life. So please sit back and let's dive in. Before we begin, we want to remind our listeners that this podcast represents the opinions of Tiffany Graves, Eric Stone, and the show's guests. The content here should not be used as medical advice. It is for informational purposes only, and please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. This podcast should not be in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing a standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. There is no guarantee regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient relationship.
All right, guys, we are back and we're going to be looking at social media and empathy.
Yeah, I honestly, seems like a newish concept. I don't know about you, Tiffany, but newish to me on some of the things that we have talked about or looked into. So, um, I will just add that we are not scholars on this topic, but we are curious about this topic and are excited to talk about it. So, the term we are kind of trying to get into today is social empathy. So, like empathy on a larger change, empathy like maybe in a more communal way or different things like that. And I don't want to steal, I usually steal the thunder from Tiffany, and I'm trying to turn a new leaf. So I'm going to let Tiffany, if you have anything you want to say first, then I'm going to start stealing leaves, but not right yet.
No worries. There are plenty leaves to go around. But yeah, we're essentially going to kind of really look at empathy, like in the context of social media and how it's overall impacting how we empathize with the people around us and how we its impact on emotional expression and things of that nature.
Yeah, so I think just kind of diving in. So social media is social, but also there's like community. But one of the aspects of it is online and social. So, for example, if there is a political cause that someone believes in and shares something or maybe a special interest, if they share that and are then able to get that kind of support of, "Hey, I really appreciate this," or, "Oh, that's awesome." Like, that can be very encouraging and can be a show of empathy. Tiffany, is that kind of the track you're thinking of this as well?
Yeah, I think that was definitely in my track of thinking for us to talk about. But I think a lot of kind of the notes that I took looks at more of like the negative impacts and things of that nature and kind of how it's skewing us away from genuine empathy. And like how that can make us and how empathies now can make some people uncomfortable.
So this is why we record live, because Tiffany and I are both neurodivergent, and so sometimes we'll be like, "Hey, is this what we're doing?" We're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah," and then I can tell that we have prepared. But I like where you're at, so we're gonna pivot because I'm like, I had something different perhaps, but I also agree with you. So I'm like, I went a very interesting neurospicy, dove into something that we'll just see if it comes up another time. I love that. So more of the negatives of social media on empathy.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we really hardcore dive into, I do just want to put out that social media is really good at facilitating a form of empathy through connection because it connects people across the world and it allows users to explore very diverse perspectives and experiences. Thus, it can increase empathy by making us more aware of global issues and human suffering and cultural differences. But at the same time, it's a very different form of empathy versus when you're interacting on a personal, physical interactive level.
Keep going. Keep going. I'm with you a little bit, but I feel like I'm not all the way there. So I feel like if you say anything else, it'll help me know where we're going.
Yeah, so really I want to look at like those superficial interactions. Like not to say that like empathy that's created through connection is superficial, but it's a different point on the spectrum of what empathy really is. And looking at how, the very fast-paced nature of social media in general can lead us to having superficial interactions rather than those deep-seated interactions we might have with someone that we interact with on a daily basis.
So you're saying, hey, it seems like social media is a little disingenuous.
Yes, like while we can like, and now they even have the new like care emoji that we can like drop for people, it creates
Yeah.
a very good illusion of connection. It makes us feel like we're connecting to these, people, potentially even strangers that are out there. But in reality, it like there's a depth that is lacking. There is no true empathetic engagement by giving someone a care emoji or a like emoji or a love emoji.
This is so interesting because I think this is part of a trend that I'm just noticing is that it feels like people are definitely ready for more in person. And I totally feel that, like wanting to connect, wanting to go do things, like people feel ready. And it also seems like with that comes maybe people like really highlighting the deficiencies of online. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like really like where like the positives are not being evaluated. Like, I feel like we're looking through a lens right now of like, here are the deficiencies of online stuff. Not like you specifically, Tiffany, but just in general, I think a lot of people are like being more critical and maybe seeing the weaknesses, which there definitely are. It's just kind of interesting that it's like it feels like we're kind of going backwards where it's like we're devaluing any positives that could
Mhm.
come from an online space or connection right now.
Media has its positives for sure. But I think COVID really kind of like hit it home for a lot of people that like while it provided a sense of social connection, it wasn't the same type of social connection that they were used to when they were physically interacting with people. And I think people are starting to recognize that like there is like something missing when you strictly engage in social interactions versus a mixture of social and like personal interactions with people.
No, that is a very fair take. I am just noticing that like it seems like people are more divided versus I'm like it is very different, but I also am like there are some people that's the only support they have. And so I'm just kind of sitting here like I definitely think that in person is probably better in a lot of situations, but I think if it's none or virtual, I would argue virtual would be better than
Mhm.
none if there's like a scale. I don't know, does that seem fair? Like I'm just thinking through like shut-ins or people with maybe less access to transportation or going where maybe that's all that they're able to manage is what I'm just thinking.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why like empathy like my view of empathy is a spectrum. Like you can be extremely empathetic or you can be on the lower end. Not everyone is going to choose to engage in high levels of empathy, and that's okay. Some people don't have or don't want to choose to have that much energy put into being empathetic because on some level it can be very draining if you're being constant if you're staying at a constant high level of being empathetic towards a whole lot of things.
Yeah, no, I just think it's interesting with trends. I think sometimes like as we're moving, it definitely I mean this sounds strange. I think the world of COVID, no one's going back to. Like no one's gonna go back to like this is how we did stuff during COVID or right after. And I think you see people not understanding that with some of maybe even just business ideas or like it's you really have to be pretty compelling to hey, this is why we're doing this virtually, not in person. Honestly, like most people, I think right now prefer in person by quite a wide margin, and I kind of get it.
Yeah, yeah. That personal connection is very powerful, as we're coming to find out.
Yeah. So this is interesting. But I have read, this is just some different articles that come up sometimes, but that if you the economic success of individuals who don't live within 1 hour of a major US city, it's like really glaring. Like so just the access to certain types of jobs, uh housing, all
Mhm.
types of things. So I'm thinking as we shift back into, hey, we're doing more in person, more in person, more in person, I would suspect that those folks not within that bubble and range start to feel um, even more disconnected and less access than even they have right now. Not that it was ever going to be equal, but I think it'll get worse as those things move that direction.
Yeah, it would not surprise me if we like our pendulum swung really hard into the virtual world with COVID, and it seems like it's moving to swinging really hard back into like everything being in person. And it wouldn't surprise me if there's some repercussions for how our pendulum is swinging too far to the extremes.
Yeah. So I do think we all have gotten very disconnected in general, and so people are trying to rebuild, like, real connections, and so, yeah, an online care button is not the same thing as someone bringing you soup and, getting your mail because you're unable to walk down your driveway because 'cause you're sick.
Yeah, yeah. Something else that popped up quite a lot when I was looking into um, empathy, like social media's impact on empathy, is that social media algorithms often reinforce existing beliefs that users hold because it aligns with your values, which leads to a creation of echo chambers where empathy for differing perspectives is diminished and polarized because the algorithm is finding things that like align with you.
Yeah, I mean, those algorithms are real, they definitely can shape one's reality by just even, like, what one sees or doesn't see. It's definitely got some challenges, and I mean, I think about I mean, what study have you seen, Tiffany, that's, like, been evaluating social media time of any social media app, and they have any positive decrease in stress, anxiety, or depression? Like, I'm not aware of a single one. Are you? Unless they, like, looked at puppies, their friends' puppies, maybe. That would be interesting. Just
Yeah.
all your friends' puppies and kittens. You just look at those, but nothing else.
I agree. I haven't seen a positive research article on any of that at any point in time. Yet. I will put yet because maybe there is one out there somewhere that I just haven't seen.
I do think there's just a lot of changes and shifts happening. I just I'm gonna be really curious if honestly, I think a year from now, this conversation very different. Like what I think it'll be like, hey, so remember when people were doing like I don't know what it'll be, but I think it'll be different a year from now. I really do. Like in a more than just, hey, it's 2025. I think it's gonna be like, you know, I don't know. I think it's just gonna
Mhm.
be very different.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, something to like think about and keep in our mind, like as we're noticing these differences, and then this came to mind as you were talking about like the research about like social media apps, is social media is really good, whether it's intentional or unintentional, at creating empathetic fatigue. That constant exposure of distressing news and images and personal stories that we can compare ourselves to can easily like deplete our empathy stores. And when you become overwhelmed by the volume of suffering that you encounter, it can also desensitize or emotionally drain you to a point where you don't feel like you like have the ability to empathize. And that in itself can create a very vicious cycle of feeling guilty about the fact that like you're not empathetic towards other people because you've already used so much of your empathy on things that you're being bombarded with.
It does pull. I like the term bandwidth. I think a lot that we only all have so much bandwidth, and so if it's getting sucked up constantly by the next TikTok dance or sports highlight, or meme or what, whatever it is, it does. There is only so much attention and energy in the day, and it is captivating. It is going to pull. Um, I just, yeah, yeah. This may feel like a tangent, but I feel like it's one that I have a dream of the US political system being different. Like, and the reason I'm saying this is in France, they literally, I'm no political expert, so I'm not going to pretend to be here for just a second, but they literally, like, their version of Congress, they called an election for that. I think within 2 weeks, they did the whole thing sincerely, start and campaign done. Then they did another presidential election within 2 weeks. So within a month, they did their Congress, presidential, and it's done. Could you literally imagine if we did all of this in a month? We don't have to do this. I mean, my God, just could you imagine?
My mind is over here. You did blown my mind because I'm like, wait a minute. If only political shit happened within a month's time span,
Could you just
holy
imagine,
moly,
like
could you
like
imagine?
we are weird in the United States versus how the rest of the world, like the world does shorter elections than us. I just have this memory traveling, college. I'm in Australia during one of the election lead ups, and they were just like, "How do you guys do elections that long?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" Because I didn't know anyone did it different. It's like, yeah, our elections are like a month, and I literally just couldn't even fathom. Like a month is like how the first person nags on the second person, and then there's the ninth. There's 10 more waves of that, and I mean, like it's just insane. I think Donald Trump like announced his campaign like a year and a half ago, like a year and a half before the election, he started officially
Hmm.
campaigning for this one. And I think actually when he won his first term, he officially that day started campaigning for his next term. It's like, it's just this thing of like, it's just wild. Just honestly, it's just absolutely
Yeah,
wild.
that's that's very wow.
But if you think about our algorithms, and the reason I bring this up, there are billions of dollars spent to get those ads, send those spam texts to this party's the worst, this party's the worst, like all those things that we're getting to our phones, emails, donate. Could you imagine if that's only a 2 week period of the algorithm or a 4 week period? All that's out, and then it's whatever. But it's just, I don't, yeah, I do think the algorithm's steering things, and I do think you have people who don't realize what they're consuming, like influences behavior. I'm sure we've talked about this here, but I just really need to like bring it up again about how advertising works. It is not you scroll Facebook, you see an ad for Las Vegas, and you're like, oh my God, let's buy tickets right now. Like, that's not how they measure their success in any capacity. Like, they're trying to make it the next time that you pay to go on a trip, you're probably thinking about going to Las Vegas. That's how they're measuring. Did they steer you towards considering Las Vegas when you were thinking about Vermont? I don't know. I'm not sponsored by either of those places. Very open to being sponsored by both, though. So if you are wanting to sponsor a podcast and you're in Vermont or Las Vegas, Tiffany and I are very open to such things. So just give us a call, and then I will disclaimer it that we are sponsored, but currently not sponsored.
No sponsors. Yeah, that's insane. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, no, I just like to bring that up because I think sometimes people think, oh, advertising doesn't work on me. And it's more of like, hey, do you know what their name is though? Or hey, did you know, like, do you know anything about them? Did you know they're running? Did you know that this product is this? Like that's some of it. And I think sometimes we think, oh, but I didn't buy it. And it's like, yet is the ominous way of saying it. But also, if you think about things like anger, you think about all these angry young men on the internet supporting one another, engaging with things that feed their anger. It's an actual clinical problem right now.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of leads us into social media's impact on emotional expression and how people are oversharing. People are oversharing personal struggles, seeking empathy or validation. And while sometimes it can create opportunities, it can also lead to discomfort or insensitivity from others that other people might not know how to respond to appropriately or like at all.
Yeah, it seems a little like we've overdone it a bit, or maybe just even like the hey, praying, or oh, like don't ask me about it. like as a Facebook status or a tweet or whatever we call Twitter now. You know, like those kinds of things or a story, like it does change things. Um, yeah, I think we have to be careful because I feel like this stuff isn't gonna go anywhere. So I think it's like we can acknowledge the impact of what those things are doing, but like there isn't going to be a world where there isn't social media and internet and people who know how to use it to influence behavior. So it's kind of like maybe a better discussion is like, hey, how do we adjust to that world where there's the internet and algorithms and
Mhm.
all of those things going on?
Can be really, can be a really difficult like topic to navigate when you encounter that on any social media platform. I think too, I always like have to remind myself that a lot of things that I see online is a very specifically curated self-presentation. Like people are choosing to present themselves, present the version of themselves that you see online, for, you know, whatever reason they're choosing to do that. Whether it be, you know, whether it be envy or they're seeking validation, it is a choice that they're choosing to like interact with people online in a specific manner. Which that in itself, like I don't know about you, but like when I think about social media in that like context, sometimes it can be really difficult to want to feel empathetic when I know like this is someone's choice. And I have to think about like how do I want to respond to like this type of choice? Or like do I want to respond to this choice?
Yeah, I know that's hard to like give an example without identifying somebody, right? You know, but I do know what you mean where it's like if someone's sharing something or going, I mean, this is something we probably can't get all the way into today, but like as a human, we're going to judge. Like you can't help that initial judgment. Like that's not within your control. What you do with that is within your control. So if I'm judging Tiffany for sipping her coffee or something, like I can't control that I did that, but I can control if like I give that any, you know, oh yeah, that's fair to judge somebody for that. Or I'd be
Mhm.
like, oh wow, that's weird. You drink coffee literally every second. So how about you just roll with it? You know, that I do think we're in this very I don't know. I just think we've forgotten some things, which is maybe like why people are like, oh my god, I forgot how great I feel and I have community or things going on. So I don't know. I just we're in a very unique place in the world and time in the world, and I just think a lot of
Mhm.
this is really moving. And like some people may be like, well, anyone could say that every year, but like legitimately have not said that beyond when it was COVID. Like the first year of COVID, I'm like, yeah, this is pretty unprecedented. Like I think this next year is going to be pretty unprecedented as things shift, to be honest.
Oh yeah. So I want to tweak us a little bit because I know we're here to talk about social media and trauma. So that was my other big point is to look at how the lack of empathy from perpetrators and bystanders on the internet can exacerbate and highlight the dark side of social media interaction and how that can, you know, play into emotional distress, anxiety, depression, and like an exacerbation of like trauma symptoms for people.
Oh, man, yeah, no, I do think as it stands right now, at least, there's no filter that I think they have some stuff marked as graphic, so you could say, "I don't wanna see graphic," and it would just filter it out, and some stuff does it, but, like, I don't think as it stands right now, you could put a block of, like,
Mhm.
"I don't wanna see military stuff," like, so you put that in, and then it blocks out anything with military, or, "I don't wanna see anything with a gun." Um so I do think if you're on the internet and using something like social media where really anything can be on there, you may not know um, what a trigger or activator could be. I think about some of the clients I've worked with that have struggled with infertility, and I mean, man, if you just talk about social media, most people are posting if they have their kids and what they're doing, and it's all over. So like, you really probably couldn't even. unless you knew the people who had kids and you filtered it some way, like, you really would not be able just to get on Facebook randomly. Um, Not that everyone needs to not be able to do that, but I wouldn't judge anyone that's like, "I just really can't be on social media and see all those photos while I'm dealing with that." That just hurts.
Yeah, yeah, it really can create an isolating effect when you have to like filter things out because people are posting, potential triggers and things of that nature.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's just one of those things that, like, you could put boundaries in place, you could try to manage it, but it's one of those things, like, it's I feel like I'm talking as a substance use counselor, or sometimes I'll talk with some of my clients about, "Can you go back to that barbecue?" And it may be like, "Yeah, it's fine, I can handle it, no biggie, like, I'm in a good spot," but for some people, it's like, "No, I probably can't go to that barbecue without feeling, like, really bad afterwards, and then probably doing things I don't really wanna do." And that's maybe how I'm viewing this of, like, maybe you can be on there. Do you wanna go through that? Do you not? But I do think we have to be mindful about what we're consuming, whether it be food or connections or media or social media. It's just it does have an impact. It does bring about different things.
Yeah, yeah. And that kind of brings me like not want to like to beat a dead horse, but back to that superficial empathy. Like if you're dealing with trauma, or you're trying to process through trauma, like it can feel very insufficient or hollow, even disappointing when like people are just simply like giving you emojis and like there's no like deeper meaning other than like an emoji. Like I can imagine that it feels very like a brush to the side. If I was to post something about my trauma journey and I got a bunch of emojis, but no one actually
Mm,
reached out in like an empathetic manner to like express said care when care has been minimized to
hmm.
like a button.
I have definitely had clients have that experience. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I think I'm just so struck because I've had clients where people have really gone above and beyond. Um, and we don't really see that because it's private. So
Mhm.
like a private message of like, I'm so sorry, what can I do to help you? So yeah, I am struck that I think that I could totally see someone sharing something like that and only getting some likes. But maybe it speaks to the problem you're picking up on, Tiffany, where you're like, "Hey, social media isn't enough. Like, those connections aren't enough. You need real support." And so, like, I would agree. If the only support you got if you were dealing with something like infertility was some likes on Facebook, I don't think that would be enough for anyone.
Mhm. Yeah, I can only imagine how like isolating it feels like if you don't encounter that those individuals who are amazing enough to reach out and all you're getting for validation is likes and hearts and care
Yeah.
emojis.
I think the other thing This could get a little spicy up in here. I think another thing is not everyone gets the same amount of access to social support for lots of different factors. So that could be things like, are they like like that could go to things from like discrimination to just, different factors of connection. But uh, so I think everyone needs social support. I think the problem maybe comes down is that we know some people are really good at making that, getting it, or getting reconnected to it. And there are some that are just very difficult to get any form of that going or maintaining it. And um, I'm not going to stereotype any specific diagnosis, but I would think some of those depression symptoms could be very severe, and people struggling with that. It's very hard sometimes to want to like send that text, check in with someone, go that comes with some of the symptomology. Um, and so I could just see someone with like
Hmm.
maybe struggling with more of the depression. It could be very hard for them to, even if they were going to whatever the events are or putting themselves out there, like it would still be a challenge for them to feel or make those connections, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I know.
And nope, you go.
You start.
No, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. You go.
I was just gonna like further like poke the point a little bit in terms of trauma survivors have reported that the perceived empathy from people on social media can is viewed more as performative rather than genuine. And that has shown an increase in cynicism, disappointment, and further isolation from people, from trauma survivors. They viewed it as people using their pain as a tool for others to appear virtuous rather than actually being understanding and supportive.
Yeah, I get nervous. No, I'm nervous because I'm like I feel like I'm nervous thinking about who is judging who, right? And who gets to decide like what is genuine or but I think it speaks to the point that like some people could go through the same thing and have very different journeys. And not everybody's symptoms are like show up in this really cool
Mm-hmm.
social media way where you're like, "Oh, that's so beautiful, how inspiring." Like that's something I think if I could just speak myself as a trauma therapist and maybe a survivor of some trauma, like not everyone's trauma shows up in this really inspirational way. Like it wasn't inspirational when I was too angry all the time and overreacting to everything. It wasn't inspiring for some of my clients when like their house looks like a mess. They don't have some business they created because they went through a trauma or have a book or something. Like it was just all of this pain and all these wounds. And so that's where I just get nervous of like I try never to have my clients compare to anyone else's experience because literally it usually is like completely different. And if we're like, oh, but theirs is so pretty and it's roses, and I just think it starts a lot of day. Like so honestly, if you're listening to this at all, I would really encourage you, like if you feel inspired, great. But if you start to feel shaming and blaming, I would not be comparing your journey to anyone else's, whether you're in or out of therapy because I think it just can lead to some unhelpful things if it's just going unchecked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it creates a vicious cycle, like a vicious sticky cycle that really is very experience based. Some people can view like the likes and hearts as effective and like as people responding in a communicative manner, and some people don't. And depending on where you are, your viewpoint of how that's happening, that can either be like helpful for your journey or hurtful for your journey. Like it can be genuine empathy, or it can be superficial empathy. Everyone's interaction and experience and incorporation of social media is going to have a different impact depending on their relationship with social media and
Mm.
empathy.
This is good. We need to keep coming to this one. I think this like idea of connection and support because it's a conversation. I think if you're not having this conversation right now with yourself or other people around you, I'd really challenge you that I think you should. Um, this is something I think pretty much everyone's dealing with in some form or fashion. What do I do? How do I get these connections? What kind of support? Um, because there are so many health outcomes, it's not even we don't have enough time to list them all that are linked positively with social support. So if I have more social support, I can better manage my anxiety, my depression, maybe even my trauma in some capacity, or like we're just that's just mental health. We're not even talking like physical health, like heart disease, all these other things. Family support. I mean, we're not meant to do this alone. We are social creatures. We are not meant to be in isolation. And so with that means that we do need different types of support. Um, the last thing I want to say though, just today, because I want to just have some context on my end, is you can only give what you can afford to give. So if you're a person and like you have a bunch of friends and they're like, hey, would you want to get weekly coffee? And you don't have an hour to do that, then you got to say no because you don't have the time to do that. So as much as I do want people to help and support, you have to protect your own health because being a supportive friend in person doesn't mean that you just have to have no mental health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And to kind of wrap up things today, um, just as a reminder, social media's relationship with trauma and empathy is extremely multifaceted. While it offers opportunities for connection, support, and advocacy, it also presents challenges such as superficial empathy, re traumatization, and the risk of performative support. Navigating these dynamics does require a careful balance with an emphasis on promoting genuine empathy, setting boundaries, and fostering safe spaces for trauma survivors. Um, so we just want to make sure that we're using social media um, as an effective tool for healing and support rather than a deconstructive tool.
Well said. I appreciate this, Tiffany. I think this is something we should lean into for a bit, honestly.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Deciphering Growth. We hope you found our conversation helpful and insightful. Subscribe to our podcast for more episodes and check out our Patreon for more content. Don't hesitate to contact us on social media if you have any questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep growing.